Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fiction genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians, as well as the latest episode of The 100. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows I'm talking about. So, for example, if you want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of The Magicians, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The 100. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Magicians. And first of all, we have Quentin kind of telling Margot and Elliot, obviously the whole seeing Alice situation, and then basically he's trying to call her Niffin. Basically, it has to be something personal that kind of like attract them, and basically for him, it's doing some Cirque du Soleil type of thing, and it's just like. Because it's something he used to actually do for her when she was like feeling down. He'd do it just to cheer her up because it'd make her laugh. And even Margaret was like, "Oh, that hurts my heart a little bit." And Quentin's like, "Shut up." She's like, trying to be sincere here." Obviously they're thinking like, "Oh, obviously he's just grieving and everything." But it turns out maybe not the case, because he goes to her memorial, but then he kind of sees things unfold, and it's just like she's constantly popping up to him, showing him the way. It's like, "Oh yeah, you should do this, and this." Like, kind of giving him the password to her dad's study so that Quentin can find the book that she's trying to lead him to, like all of these like missing pieces. And basically her dad ends up looking through the book, and it's like, oh yeah, like this is connected some, essentially kind of making like a pyramid, basically kind of doing an Egyptian ritual to basically put her soul at rest is kind of what they were thinking, which I was thinking like Quentin was aiming more so to bring her back, but it seemed more so like trying to put her soul at rest because she's popping up all over the place. It's like because she's just kind of lost in the void, and it's like they have to put her to rest. Which, like, basically there's this whole ritual situation. Her dad has to like basically climb on a ladder, recite something into a mirror and stuff like that. But at first he can't do it. He's asking Quentin to do it, but Quentin's like, "No, you should be the one to do it. You said it has to be a blood relative." But you end up finding out. At first I was thinking like, okay, the reason why he's like that is because he's so hurt, he doesn't feel like he deserves the right to do it or something like that. Turns out that's not the case. It happens like that because he's actually afraid of heights. That the fact is that basically there's a whole situation because Alice showed him a picture of her with her cat. Essentially her cat got stuck somewhere high. Her dad, too ashamed to admit the fact is he was afraid of heights, kind of yelled at her because he's like, "That's what you typically do when you're ashamed." And just kind of reminiscing about the fact is that he wasn't the best father. And when it's all said and done, he ended up falling off the ladder, hurting both his legs, if not outright breaking them, because he's both in the cast. And then he's getting drunk and everything, just like he just kind of wants to forget. Because he's not even because Quentin keeps bringing up, it's like, you should know how Alice died. She died a hero, but he's like, he didn't want to know because he's so caught up in his own sadness and stuff like that. Then Stephanie's like, "Okay, I'm gonna help you." It's like, "Oh, he told you that I wasn't in the right mindset to do this, wasn't he?" Well, it turns out he was right not to let you in on it because she wasn't in the right mindset. Because at first because as we kind of met her last season, so obviously we know what kind of person Stephanie is, what kind of mom she was. Obviously at the beginning she's saying that whole situation with being like, "Oh, I was such a good mother," like, and all this stuff, which at first she's saying stuff like that, trying to make the whole situation about her, but then eventually she kind of broke down and was like, "You know what? The fact of the matter is, I wasn't a good mother. The fact is that I didn't really understand my daughter, that on some level I resented her because she didn't know, like, raising a daughter would be that hard." Like I said, last season, you saw the way she kind of treated Alice. Like, she treated Alice like there was something wrong with Alice. Like, she was too busy almost trying to be like a friend to Alice rather than being a mom. And, partway through it, Stephanie runs away, and Quentin's like, "We gotta finish this." And then we see Alice pop up, and she's like, You're such an idiot." It seems that basically this entire situation was Niffin Alice screwing with him. Obviously popping up in front of him and stuff like that. This whole thing was basically, because the Niffin is basically the magic. That's all there is. There's no like, because Alice always had a problem with her parents. This is like almost an unfiltered Alice. So now, this is kind of her being vindictive. Like, she always resented her parents, and now this is her way of getting them back. That this whole false thing to basically make them admit that they're pieces of crap parents. I mean, they're not the worst parents, but they weren't the best parents either. So I'm thinking that's what this is all about. Just kind of screwing with them. It's like, now her dad hurt herself. Now her mom has to confront the fact that she wasn't a good parent. Kind of essentially breaking both of her parents in a certain sense. And it turns out that Alice never died. The fact is that was all a ruse, because what happened is when he used the Keiko demon, it couldn't kill her because she was too powerful. So what it did instead, it sealed her in it, which kind of makes sense because like there was one point in the episode where you see Quentin walking away and he's touching the tattoo. I was like, that's kind of interesting. I was like, is that acting up or something? And it's like, no, that was a little slight note to kind of tell you where that was going. Like it was feeling uncomfortable because Alice is sealed in there and she's like, we're going to have a lot of fun together. Like the reason why she never came when he tried to summon her at the beginning of the episode is because she's always been with him the entire time. She's been basically screwing with him. So that's going to be very interesting. I'm wondering, is he going to tell everyone that or not? I mean, it makes you wonder, like, does she hold any resentment towards Quentin because he's the one that killed her? I mean, he didn't. Well, actually, he never killed her, but I'm very curious to see how that all plays out. Like, will she try to mess with him like she did her parents or what? I mean, the fact is that she's inside of him. Like, does that mean, obviously she can make him see her all over the place, and she can obviously make him see other things because she made him see the key card. So it's like, what else could she make him see? Just kind of to screw with him, you know? Very interesting development. I did not see that coming. Down the other side of things, we had the whole Julia situation. She ends up finally tracking down the woman who created the spell. Her name's Dana. At first, Dana's kind of like, yeah, she was basically in the same situation as Julia. She got pregnant from Reynard as well. But then, like, she's like, I can help you kind of find a way to kind of seal Reynard again. Because basically the spell she used was very powerful. Because I forgot, like, basically there was, like, natural disaster type of things happening all over the place. Hurricanes, there's even like a fire, and the only building that was left was this one particular building. Everything around it was kind of burned, and it was like into a perfect circle around it. So it was like, it was some very powerful magic needed to get rid of Reynard. And obviously Dana ends up attacking Julia and knocking her out because it's like basically explaining everything to her because she talks about the fact that Dana was like, yeah, I couldn't get rid of my baby. And then like, I was like, why? Did you get attached to it? It's like, you were under the same circumstance. Julia wants to get rid of her baby, but maybe I was thinking because Dana's like, yeah, I tried to kill myself, but I just couldn't go through it. I was thinking like, oh, maybe she tried to kill herself, but the baby stopped her. Turns out that's not the case. It seems that the reason why she was able to perform the spell she could to get rid of Reynard, because he is a god and that power doesn't come easy, is that basically your baby is a demigod. So that basically when the baby is being born, you're able to tap into that energy that it has, and that's how she casts the spell. And she's like, for Julia, if she wants to get rid of Reynard, she's going to have to wait. She's going to have to give birth to the baby and then cast a spell. That's the only means of getting enough power to get rid of Reynard. But for Julia, it's like, no, she doesn't want any reminder of him. She doesn't want that baby at all. Which we looked at that creature she calls, was it a Haxan Paxton? And I was like, because like I assumed, Julia was like, yeah, so is that what my baby's going to look like? She's like, you idiot, this isn't a baby, this is a Haxan Paxton. Essentially, it's some kind of creature that basically she captured. Essentially, it keeps her hidden from Reynard. That's how she's been able to stay hidden all these years. She tells about the fact is that her son, she basically didn't tell her son who she is or who or what he is. That basically, I can only assume she gave him up for adoption, kind of or maybe sealed away his powers or whatever. I'm sure that's going to turn into something later on, especially because she brought up the fact that said, yeah, my son, he's a good man, Julia, kind of saying like, just because he's Reynard's baby doesn't mean he's a monster like Reynard, being like, oh, he's an influential man, which is like, the fact that she went out of her way to mention that means I guess we're going to come across him at some point this season. If not, he's not unless he's someone that we've already met and we just never realized that's who he was, because even he doesn't realize who or what he is. So I'm wondering, did she, because obviously she probably checks up on him every once in a while to know exactly what kind of situation he's in and calling him an influential man and everything. But luckily for Julia, Katie was able to show up and saved her, which obviously she couldn't use magic. She's like, yeah, your magic doesn't work. She's about to swing the bat, but Katie just knocks her out with a punch. It's like, what? Kind of shows you tells us how badass Katie is. But they end up taking the Haxan Paxton, so now they can stay hidden from Reynard. But this leaves Dana vulnerable, which Reynard comes and pops up and it's like, oh, you've stayed hidden all these years, and it's like, I guess I'm gonna have to punish you for like hiding away all this time. Which does beg the question, does Reynard know about her being pregnant? Just like Julia, I don't think he knows. I mean, because probably immediately afterward, because obviously there's like the 9-month period, which does beg the question, is it a situation where the pregnancy would be quicker because it is a demigod, or is it just like any other? I mean, obviously not like a regular pregnancy as we saw last episode, but it's gonna be interesting because Katie did kind of talk to someone about helping with this whole Julia situation, which the lady that was helping her is like, yeah, the fact is we normally don't do business with their. Well, I don't know whether she was talking specifically about Julia or someone else, because I think it's because like, well, no, I think it's because like specifically the person Katie's going to about the whole pregnant Julia situation is like normally we don't do business with her kind unless we absolutely have to, just because it's like essentially they can kind of come and screw you over. So they said the name Monica, not unless they were saying something else, but I don't know whether they're talking about Julia. Maybe she gave Julia a fake name when they were talking, or maybe they're talking about the person that. No, they're definitely talking about the person that Katie was talking to about helping with Julia's situation. So it's like, I guess she had to get some supplies for that particular person. So it does beg the question, what will Julia do? Because she doesn't want the baby, but the fact of the matter is she doesn't. She wants to get rid of Reynard too, so it's like she's in a tough situation. Does she keep the baby, give birth to it? I mean, it seems like Dana actually is okay with her baby, like even under the circumstances. It seems like she's like the fact that, like I said, she's like he's a good man, trying to say he's not like his dad. So I'm very interested to see how that goes out, and I am interested to find out if she ends up telling Reynard like, "Oh, I'm pregnant, your baby. You keep me alive, and I won't tell. If you keep me alive, I'll tell you exactly how to find your son. Like if you kill me, you will never be able to find him." Type of situation. Maybe she'll even sell out Julia and be like, the fact of the matter is Julia's trying to send you back and she's pregnant with your child. I mean, do whatever she can to save herself. I mean, especially after Julia and Katie kind of screwed her over and have now revealed her to Reynard. And then other side of the story, we had the whole Fillory situation where, well, from one, Finn finally tells Elliot the whole situation about her and Baylor. And the fact of the matter is, it wasn't an ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend type of situation. It seems like they were just friends. At least that's what she says. But the fact of the matter is, she's like, at the beginning, she wasn't all that keen about this whole situation herself. Because she obviously knows that, Elliot's not that into her. But at the very least, she's like, I could have left at any point in time. But I stayed because I believe in you. Because the fact is, she sees the kind of person Elliot is. And the fact is that even the way he is now, that he is willing to try and fix this whole situation. But I guess it's kind of a situation where it's like, once Elliot's belief in you is kind of crushed, it's hard to kind of get that trust back, especially knowing the fact is, I mean, in his words, it's like, yeah, you're kind of with a terrorist group. And she's like, we weren't a terrorist. We never did violence. He's like, no violence. The fact is your friend just tried to choke me out, trying to kill me. And she's like, normally that's not their tactic. So I was actually surprised because like Baylor made that whole situation last episode being like, oh, I'm going to tell him the truth. But it's like, nope, she ended up telling him the truth herself, even though she was reluctant to. Because Baylor was like, oh, the fact is the way Elliot is, like, there's no guarantee it's going to work out in your favor if you tell him the truth. So, I mean, for Elliot, it's even more hard with the whole trust situation because the time they spent together, he's actually started to actually like her and care for her. Plus, that's, like, his wife. That's also his, the mother of his child, too. So, it's a situation where it's like, it leaves him very conflicted. But basically, in this episode, Margot and Elliot are met by a prince from another. Well, his name is Princess, and then you have Elliot being like, "Wait, Princess?" But you're kind of like, basically, you're a dude. He's like, "Just call me S," and he's like, "Oh, Prince S." He's like, "Man, fuck your mom, right?" But basically, he's come that basically is like, yo, you guys basically screwed this up. There's a whole whale situation. I mean, because more so than anything, they're kind of blamed the most for this whole circumstances because the beast himself, Martin was human and from Earth. So it does put them in a situation where I'm sure not just them. I'm sure a lot of people hold resentment towards Elliot and Margot because it's like, oh yeah, the beast was one of your people and he came here and kind of destroyed Fillory to a certain extent. Well, just all of this world. Because for them, it's like they relied on the wellspring, I don't know why I did that backwards, for different stuff. And it's like, okay, so what we're going to do this time is we're going to come to an agreement. We'll split the wellspring 50-50, and I'll marry the virgin princess Margot, which both Margot and Elliot kind of laugh at the notion of like, oh, being a princess. I mean, God, I don't know why. Her being a virgin. I don't know. Sorry, I'm just kind of out of it right now. Sorry, but which Margot's kind of like, screw you. The fact is, I'm not marrying you, you piece of crap. Which Elliot's like, yo, whoa, Margot, calm down. But she kept going, and it's like, okay, I see how it is. So they end up casting a spell to teleport them to Loria, and that basically they'll kind of back down once. Then when an agreement's met, they'll decide to be like, okay, we'll send you back. Because it's a pretty awesome looking spell because it's like it left a crater and everything. Which I love the map maker being super pissed. Like, he's like, oh, great. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, I have to draw. This is literally, there are now no appropriate maps, correct maps of this whole situation. So he's got to fix it. And by the end of the episode, I love the fact that he's like, and finish touches. And then the castle comes back. He's like, son of a bitch. He's like, I just finished this and now the castle's bad. I mean, what I love is the fact is, for one, there's that whole Margot and an S situation where she's just like, yo, you think I'm just like, because obviously Margot's got her problems with it because it's like, I'm not just going to marry someone for the sake of something else, it's like, which Elliot at first is kind of like, well, the fact of the matter is I kind of did a similar circumstance. And she's like, well, your situation's different. It's like, no, it's kind of the same situation. You don't marry out of love, you marry out of obligation because you just have to. Which he's kind of suggesting Margot do that, which later on in the episode, he's kind of like, never mind, don't do that. Especially after the whole Finn situation. It's like, the fact is you don't know who you're marrying, what that can mean marrying that person. It's like, because with marrying someone you're not really that familiar with, you learn kind of more of their darker side later on. So, he cares about Margot and he wants, whatever her decision is, he'll back her up. That's his best friend and everything. So he doesn't want to force her to be like, oh, you have to do this. It's like, no, you do whatever you feel like doing, Margot. The fact is, I'll back you up no matter what. Which, there was a whole, but like, getting back to it, the whole Prince S and Margot, and just like her being like, oh, getting all on him, and this is being like, oh, I can do it without, I'm a master at not touching, but also touching. I was like, dude, I was like, whoa, that's pretty intense. And then they ended up having sex. Which did kind of get in my head. It made me wonder, like, does Margot actually kind of like him now that she spent a little time with him? Maybe she's got to know him a tiny bit. Maybe she actually does like him. Because it did seem like she was going to be more okay with marrying him. It seemed like maybe. Just because she kind of had a smile on her face before Penny ended up tracking him down. Because it turns out, it's like, oh yeah, you actually didn't go to Loria. Actually, you're still there. It's basically an illusionary spell, which they break. Which a pissed off Margot is like calling him out. It's like, oh yeah, essentially we're going after you hard for all you've done. And Elliot's like, yes, and she's like, that's why we're declaring war on you. And Elliot's like, yes. Wait, what? Really? Which I can only assume Margot's doing because her pride's hurt. Because the fact that she slept with him and everything, she even considered marrying him. Like, the fact is, just because it's like, she thought it was a dire situation, and it's like, you played me. It's like, screw that, we're going to war. Which Elliot's like, wait, what? I know you're pissed and everything. You have the right to be pissed, but to go to war? It's like, we're supposed to be more rational, king and queen. We're supposed to do this, handle this very politically. Which is like, it's kind of a situation where it's like, it makes you wonder, would things be better if Quentin is there or not? Would things be any better if Quentin was there? Because it was like, Elliot did want his help with this whole situation, but Quentin had to deal with the whole Alice situation. He wanted to go to a memorial, be there for her parents and everything. So, very interested to see how everything goes down next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of The 100. So in this episode, we do see Octavia making her way there, but she finally kind of gives out and her body falls off the horse, and it's like, oh, dude, she's not going to get there in time. But then lo and behold, who's the person that comes and finds her? And it turns out to be Ilian. Ilian ends up taking her back to Arcadia, which is kind of weird to me. I'm like, why would you help her? Like, I mean, obviously you have such a problem with Sky Crew, but why would you? I was like, maybe he's just having a change of heart or something like that. Obviously, I'll get to what happens later on eventually. Well, yeah, I'll get to it. I'll kind of work my way down to it. But Octavia warns them about Rowan and his army coming. And basically they get ready ahead of time, and it basically comes down to like, hey, Rowan, we've got you surrounded. Let's talk this out. Let's figure this out. Which Clark and Rowan end up talking because basically this is all for the purposes of trying to avoid a war, because it's like if they go to war, there will be casualties on this, like on both sides. Even if Arcadia can win, all it's going to end with is a lot of people being dead on both sides. And the fact of the matter is, it's like we already got to worry about the radiation. We shouldn't be taking this time. We have a very little time, so why should we waste our time fighting when we should be working together to find a means of stopping this whole situation? So Clark and Rowan talk, and Rowan basically admits why he's pissed. He's like, the fact of the matter is, you hid the whole like ship situation. You're gonna have a place for you and your people. And she's like, the fact of the matter is, it's only gonna hold 100 people, and it's not like we wanted to use that. It's a last resort. But he's like, the fact of the matter is, you lied to me about it. Like you had this whole option. It's like, she's like, yeah, you must have talked to Kane about the whole Nightblood situation. He's like, yeah, but the fact of the matter is, it's a situation where it's kind of like, she, like, in Rowan's mind, it's almost like you pretend like you care about everyone else, but at the end of the day, the only people you really care about is your people. Sky Crew is all that really matters to you, which arguably you could honestly say, like, yes, her crew comes first, because he even brings up Lexa, because Lexa was all about protecting everyone. That eventually became the way Lexa was. And the fact is that it's like you don't really share that same mentality, because it's like this whole ship situation, only your people were on that list. I mean, because granted, if anyone else was on that list, I mean, everyone is already pissed about the list already. You even see Monty kind of giving Clark a little bit of cold shoulder, so there are still ramifications from last week's episode. But nevertheless, it's still a situation where like people would have been even more pissed if they found out. It's like, wait a minute, you have grounders on this list? What about us? You know, people would have been even more pissed. But at the very least, it's all people that are part of Sky Crew, you know, part of Arcadia. So, and even brought up an interesting conversation about the fact is that like Clark was basically kind of like, the fact is, I will do whatever it takes, and you should already know that, because I was willing to kill my mom for the sake of, you know, stopping Allie. And he's like, I did the same thing to help you out. So it's like, look at, aren't we a pair willing to hurt the people we care about most for the sake of doing what is right, you know, to a certain degree. Which I guess Clark was saying that as a means of trying to like not back down, kind of showing Rowan like, no, I'm in this fight 100%. I'm not going to like back down, kind of have a tough front. But it's like, no, you know, deep down you wouldn't, like, you would have had the choice, you would have needed to do that, but you didn't want to. It's not like you found another way. It's kind of what I'm saying. So basically what it comes down to is that whole deal. It's like, okay, so we split it up. There'll be 50 of my people, Sky Crew, and there'll be 50 of your people. He's like, but do you think your people will be happy about there only being 50 of them that could survive? And he's like, I don't care. I'm the king. They do as I say. It doesn't matter to me what they have to say. It's like, oh, I guess that's kind of true. But this whole situation, you have Riley kind of going rogue a little bit, and he's going to try and kill Rowan, which you have Bellamy offering to work with Echo to track him down, but Monty has to stay as collateral to like replace Bellamy. And she's basically, and Echo's like, you kill them if I don't come back. And so her and Bellamy are talking and everything. And Bellamy even says this interesting thing. He's like, the fact of the matter is, if Octavia had died, he's like, this chain would be around your neck right now. He's tired of it. He's like, the fact of the matter is, you're up here fighting us the most out of anyone, because she's the one that kind of put that stuff in Rowan's head of like, oh, we shouldn't believe them, be reluctant to believe them, they could be lying to you. But then like Bellamy's like, the fact of the matter is, we're all in danger. The fact of the matter is, you're so busy trying to pick sides. You're working with working with the Ice Nation Queen. Now Rowan, it's like you're so busy trying to destroy every other side and trying to make sure your side wins. You don't realize that when the radiation comes, we're all going to be dead. It doesn't matter what side you're on. Sky Crew, Tree Crew, Ice Nation, doesn't matter. We all die. So I was like, this is kind of our last option. And so Bellamy ended up, talking to Riley, which it was a scary situation because, I mean, Echo had her bow ready on him, and it's like, dude, which is understandable after all that time Riley spent imprisoned by the Ice Nation. Yes, Rowan had nothing to do with that, but the fact of the matter is he's still connected to those people. It's kind of the same situation as the Grounders. Like, Sky Crew always had their issues with the Grounders as well because a lot of their people died and stuff like that. But it's still a situation where you see where they are now. They actually work together and they trust each other. So it's kind of the same particular situation. But like I said, because Rowan, he was excommunicated. He was kicked out of the Ice Nation because, like, you know, so it's not like he really had any say on what happened to him and everything. But for Riley, it doesn't matter. It's like all it matters is like he's the king, and the fact of the matter is he has to die because his people captured me as well as many others, and we were slaves to them. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, he's like, which everyone can agree. It's like Riley should never have been on that mission because he harbors such heavy memories and just anger towards the Ice Nation. So it's kind of like, why would you bring him on the mission? But it's a situation where it's like, I guess he's a gunner, or maybe more particular, he offered to be up there, and I guess people thought he could push his need aside because this is all about avoiding war. But for him, it's all about like, no, we should just kill them now. Well, in particular, kill their king. But then Bellamy's like, don't do this. Because the fact of the matter is, you're thinking, yeah, you're pissed and angry right now. And I understand. But the fact of the matter is, if you kill him, basically it's going to turn into an all-out war that people are going to die. Essentially, if people die, their blood is going to be on his hands because he's the one that fired the shot. He's like, also, the fact of the matter is, he's like, Bellamy's like, I made that mistake. I killed a lot of people. And he's like, I was a murderer. It wasn't a situation like last season when he killed all those Grounders. It wasn't because they were attacking them. They were actually there to protect them. But he let his anger get the best of it, and he killed innocent people. So he's basically like, I got turned into a murderer. So like, don't let it happen to you. And Riley just finally calmed down and didn't fire the shot. Which, when it came down to it, Echo didn't say anything to Rowan because Rowan's like, is everything okay? She's like, yeah. So, because I'm sure that would have caused some problems. But then kind of coinciding with that whole situation, we have Alien, kind of going back to it. It made sense the moment like Alien rescued Octavian, and I was like, why would you? And then he starts looking around, I was like, of course. The heart of all the technology that he hates. And he ends up blowing up the ship. Like, he ends up going to the computer room or whatever, and basically he starts there, and basically the whole thing goes out. All the work they put into it, gone. Like, this whole deal they had with Rowan, gone. Because now it's like there's nothing left for any of them because of Alien. I mean, granted, he saved Nyla and he saved Octavia just because he does care. Like, it's interesting. Like, obviously you think because she's part of Sky Crew, he would have killed her, but the fact of the matter is he saved her, and it's like, why? I mean, more so his beef is with, technology, because I guess he took what Kane had said to heart, that basically, like, the technology, like, the whole Allie situation affected them, too. They were victims in all of this, too. So, but there he is standing before it, and then just like, and Octavia ends up telling Clark, and it's like, what does this mean going forward? Because, like, now, the Nightblood is their only option. I mean, granted, this is a situation they didn't want anyway, because we already know they have very little time. Like, at the very least, when it came to the whole fixing the ship situation, the ship was already in decent condition, so they just had to make some extra repairs to it. But now it's completely obliterated. All the changes, any good parts of it that were already there from the very beginning, are gone now. So, and as we already know, the timetable got escalated, so they didn't have 6 months, they have 2 months, and who knows how long they have now. But now it's like, that's not even a backup option. It's either Nightblood solution or they're all dead, because there's no other option for them now because of Alien. My question, I'm very curious to see what he does next episode, or the Alien looks at this as being a situation where it's like, hey, the fact of the matter is, I don't care if it was meant to save all of us, technology is bad type of situation, or will he actually regret it? Will he find out the truth, like, oh, we're all dead, we're going to die soon because of this whole situation? I am very curious about that. I'm very curious to see what Clark as well as Rowan would do. Will Rowan try to blame Clark and be like, oh yeah, you were planning on doing this from the very beginning, you're trying to get my people in there so you can blow us up or something like that, right? And maybe Clark would have to defend herself, or maybe Rowan would be like, no, he sees the devastated look on her face and realizes, obviously that was their last option too, so it's like they're definitely screwed. But I'm very interested to see what they decide to do about Alien. And on the other side of the episode, we have focuses on Abby, Jackson, and Raven. And it seems like Raven, obviously, she's sitting there watching Abby and Jackson kind of work on the, trying to figure out this Nightblood situation. But in her, like, she starts floating all of a sudden. I'm like, whoa, what is this? Like, what is it? Like, whoa, is she flying? It's like, oh, why isn't anyone seeing her or anything? And then it turns out, oh, the reason why is because it's all in her head, because at that moment, Raven's been having a seizure. She has blood coming up her mouth, out her mouth. It turns out that basically that whole situation was basically Raven's subconscious brain trying to find a way to deal with the whole Nightblood situation. Because what it comes down to is like they need zero gravity. It's the only way they can kind of get the Nightblood. I kind of missed out on the science of it, but basically zero gravity is one of their ways to kind of stabilize the Nightblood so that it could be kind of fashioned into a cure. They even find a rocket because it's like they send it up. They go into zero gravity. They can kind of, obviously, because there's no means of having zero gravity here on Earth or whatever. But it's like with this rocket, they can go up, kind of. I wonder, is there a point in the atmosphere where that, I mean, because I'm not very sciencey, so I don't really know. It's probably basic knowledge, but it's like, do you have to go high above the atmosphere? Is there a certain point where you go into the atmosphere where zero gravity starts kicking in? I am curious. Or do you have to fully go into space for that? But nevertheless, they ended up scanning Raven's brain, and it ends up seeing that basically, because basically what ended up happening is like her brain is being going into overdrive. That's why she had the seizure in the first place, because it's like all this information started flooding her brain at once, and it was just too much for her to process. Because essentially it seems that, obviously, because it's like when they used the EMP on her to fry the chip inside of her last season, there was ramifications for it. They were saying there would be ramifications for it. And it seems like this is what it is. It basically, because the chip is still there, and when it got fried, basically it did something to her brain that basically it downloaded a lot of information that Allie knew into her brain, almost kind of quote unquote upgrading her brain. And it also gives her access to Rebecca's memories too, or stuff that Rebecca would know. That's how she knew exactly where that rocket was. But, you know, Abby tells her straight up, it's like the fact of the matter is there's a spot on your brain that kind of shows that you had a stroke. And the fact of the matter, if you keep pushing yourself, if you keep tapping into this, it's going to be too much for your brain to handle and you will die. But for Raven, it's like, we've come this far, and but even if it means her dying, at the very least, she's not going to let everyone that survived this long to be killed by radiation. Like, you know, she'll find a way. Even if it kills her, it will mean finding, you know, she doesn't care as long as it means she can save everyone. Which Jackson then brings up the thought of, like, the fact is that the whole situation happened with Abby. I mean, the whole situation happened with Raven because of the EMP, and it's like the same thing happened to Abby, like where the chip had to be fried. So it's like, hey, maybe the same situation's happening with you. What she's like, don't worry, I'll tell you if I start seeing anything. Which at the end of the episode, we see her being like, oh, she sees Clark, and then she turns Clark around, but it's Clark who's been kind of hit by radiation, just like her face is all bubbly and stuff, and she's like, Mom, we don't have that much time. So, meaning that it is starting to kick in with Abby, which I can only assume one of multiple things. Well, a few things. This might mean that Raven will die during the process, and it's going to be up to Abby to fix it. That, or Abby's going to sacrifice herself to prevent Raven from using her power, like using her heightened brain too much. Abby's going to take over the situation and be like, nope, I'm the one that's going to push myself forward. I'm the older person, Raven, you've got to live. I mean, maybe they'll find a way to kind of help with this. I mean, it doesn't seem like, I don't know if there actually is a way to actually help with this. I guess the only means, because it got brought up earlier on in the season, because like, was it Jackson or, was it Jasper or Monty was like, yo, how are you accessing all this information like this? Like when she was looking into the radiation and stuff, trying to prove that it exists. And it's like, like you really did get an upgraded brain or something, didn't you? And it seems like there was truth to that. You know, it wasn't just a little bit, like her brain was like fully upgraded. So it's like, I guess you could argue like her brain is trying to compensate. The amount of information that should only exist within a computer's hard drive is all inside of her brain, and it's too much. The exact words they actually use is the fact is that she's actually using more of her brain, which I'm not, never mind. I'm just very curious to see how that all plays out. Like, it's a very good episode. Just a lot of stuff went down. Like I said, it's Nightblood or not going forward, which we don't have. Obviously, Abby and her team doesn't know about what happened, so they'll probably find out next episode. Which, much like Arrow, there won't be a new episode next week. There will be one the week after that, being March 15th. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.